The ICD has been a proactive and a firm believer in action-oriented decision-making processes. For instance, in its first ever national action plan in 2013, it came up with a set of 9 core principles. And principle number 8 specifically looked at evaluation and data collection. And it was recognized then that data and evidence are needed to monitor outcomes, advance understanding of local situations, and guide effective policy response. It recognized that data on early childhood are gathered at different sources using diverse indicators. It recognized and acknowledged that there were many gaps and inconsistencies in data gathering across the different services, and consequently, research on their impact was limited. And what has happened since then? We're 6 years down the road. ICD has initiated a number of audits, and one in particular targeted the childminding service providers. And childminders here in Seychelles usually care for children aged from 6 months, about 6 months to 3 years. And they are privately owned. And the results from this survey assisted in the development and implementation of an important framework, which was the standards framework for early childminders. Just en passant, the childminding service was unregulated, unlike the daycare providers. A second example has been the collaboration between the ICD and the Ministry of Health on 2 important projects, which we saw on video yesterday. And the first one was about monitoring child development outcomes in 2016, and the second one, data management in early childhood care and education, which was piloted in 2017. And for the monitoring of milestone, which included the Denver tests, we collected that data on about 960 children. For the Denver test, we collected data on 960 children, and for the milestone, about 1,200 children, aged from 3 years. And it was possible from the milestone exercise to look at some of the indicators, such as birth weight, length, head circumference, and breastfeeding trends. It was also possible to gauge parental perspectives, not only about the child's development, but also about the quality of the service provided by the maternal and child health service providers. And as I've said, the data management was piloted in 2017, and for 2018, all the data have already been collected and awaiting to be processed and to be reported back to the Health Ministry. And of course, the pilot was conducted with the technical assistance from the World Bank. And for this data management exercise, we used the WHO references as benchmarks, and a set of 9 indicators were developed and used for the pilot. 1, prevalence of low height for age of stunting, prevalence of wasting, terms that we've heard in yesterday's presentations as well, prevalence of overweight in children, anemia in both the pregnant women and the child and children as well, prevalence of low birth weight, proportion of pregnant women with gestational diabetes, exclusive breastfeeding, and the ninth one was the prevalence of partial breastfeeding, breastfeeding at 12 months. And just quickly, for the pilot, we had about 6,848 infants. And I think this number for Seychelles to us represent kind of big data, considering our size. And it covered children from 0 to 6 months. And for instance, we found out that about 1 in 10 young children was stunted, about 1 in 10 children was overweight, 43% of pregnant women tested positive for anemia, and a similar figure for young children, and about a quarter of children aged 6 months or less were exclusively breastfed. And as a third example of data in the EC sector was the assessment of the early learning environment in preschool, or creche as we call it here. And this was conducted again by ECD and the Department of Education in 2018. And one of the conclusions of the report was that resource provisions were below the expected standards, which could have an impact on early learning experiences of children. And finally, still in education, we have been assessing the level of readiness for preschool children. And prior to preschool, our children are exposed to different early care provisions. Some of them stay at home, some of them are with childminders, and some of them are in daycare centers. And all three have different care environments. And this assessment has tremendous predictability analytics potential if linked to later national key stage testing in education. So what will it take to improve development outcomes? And before addressing this question, perhaps, just to clarify a bit of our understanding of big data. I know we've talked about that a lot over the past couple of days. And big data is gaining much prominence due to its groundbreaking contribution to decision making in many organizations, including those in the early childhood sector. And big data is larger, more complex data sets, especially from new sources that we have normally been used to. And these data sets are so voluminous that traditional data processing software just can't manage them. That's a bit of quote from Oracle. And big data is sometimes described by the 3 V's. The 3 V's, I think initially there were the 3 V's, volume, velocity, and variety, which we can use this illustration by Picknell 2018. I remember when I started learning computing, it was all about those BBC microcomputers, Atari, whatever it was, and kilobytes was the talk of the town. And 5 years down the road, we begin to talk about megabytes. Now we're talking about terabytes and petabytes, and I don't know if it continues to increase in volume, what other B's we're going to talk about. I think probably we have a Benstrong byte at some point. And in terms of variety, as colleagues have talked about again yesterday, automation, audio, SMS, video, all sorts. And of course, in terms of velocity, um, we used to work with batch files, and now we're talking about real-time data. So we've gone a long way. And perhaps of interest for us, especially my colleagues here in Seychelles, now I'm talking about a teacher of statistics. We need to understand this whole process of data science. We've heard before about defining our objectives. Of course, ask an interesting question. Get the data. Explore the data. Model the data. Communicate and visualize. And this morning we had wonderful visualizations from Albania, if you recall. So these are the 5 steps that are involved in the data science process. So, improving outcomes, what is required? Firstly, we need to recognize that the multisectoral nature of early childhood care and development will potentially generate a huge volume of data. And to improve developmental outcomes, therefore, will require radical change in mindset to accept that decision-making needs to be data-driven. There's a second one, which is a bit of us as humans, is this element of procrastination and resistance to change. Sorry. We need to sing from the same page. Cross-sectoral sharing of information guided by strong ethical principles, safeguarding privacy and security, as have been spoken of. And of course, as others have commented on, we need trained and professional development in big data analytics, as it is called. We need a pool of trained data scientists, a pool of trained data lovers, investment in necessary technologies, including information management systems and storage for big data. And you have heard me talk about the kind of interventions or collaborations ICD have had with the health sector and education. And I think it is important again for us to expand into other early care sectors to include social and community development and the family as well. And to conclude, I believe big data and data science are the new realities, and they call for a new thinking about the way we collect, manage, store, and use data. Leaving data on shelves or hard drives is no longer an option, and I believe a winning start for all children should be achievable in the 21st century. I thank you for listening.